Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hub, and before you scroll past this video thinking quarters are just pocket change, let me stop you right there, because what if I told you that one specific quarter from 1990 could be worth $4.9 million? Yes, you heard that right, $4.9 million for a coin that most people would casually drop into a parking meter or toss into a piggy bank without a second thought. And right now, as you're watching this, that exact coin could be hiding in your old coin jar, your grandmother's dresser drawer, or even in the change you got from the grocery store yesterday, just waiting to transform your entire life in an instant. This isn't some fantasy or clickbait. This is the astonishing reality of the 1990p Washington quarter. A coin so deceptively ordinary on the surface that thousands of people have probably handled it without ever realizing they were holding a fortune that could buy multiple houses, luxury cars, and set up generations of their family for life. And today, I'm going to reveal every single secret about this incredible coin, why it's worth millions, how to identify it, and most importantly, how you could be the next person to discover one of these numismatic treasures. Now, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because after we dive deep into this 1990p quarter worth nearly $5 million, I'm going to reveal another Washington quarter from the same era that's sitting at a jaw-dropping $3 million valuation, and trust me, the story behind that second coin is even more unbelievable than this first one, with twists and turns that will leave you rushing to check every quarter you own. So make sure you don't miss a single. Second, because by the end of this video, you'll have all the knowledge you need to potentially change your financial future forever. Let's talk about why the 1990p Washington quarter has captured the attention of collectors worldwide and commanded such astronomical prices that even seasoned numismatists were left speechless when the first examples started appearing at major auctions, sending shockwaves through the entire coin collecting community and rewriting the record books for modern quarter valuations. The story begins in 1990 at the Philadelphia Mint, one of the most prestigious and historic minting facilities in the United States, a place where billions upon billions of coins have been struck over the centuries, most of them destined for ordinary circulation where they'd change hands millions of times before eventually wearing down to smooth, featureless discs of metal. But every once in a while, something goes wrong in the minting process, or perhaps we should say something goes magnificently right for collectors, because these errors and anomalies are what create the rarest and most valuable coins in existence. In 1990, the Philadelphia Mint was producing Washington quarters by the millions, standard 25-cent pieces featuring the familiar profile of George Washington on the obverse and the heraldic eagle on the reverse, coins that were meant to flow into banks, cash registers, and vending machines across America, serving their humble purpose as everyday currency. But somewhere in that massive production run, something extraordinary happened, something so rare and so spectacular that it would turn a handful of these quarters into multi-million-dollar treasures that would be pursued by collectors with the fervor usually reserved for winning lottery tickets or discovering buried treasure. The specific error that makes certain 1990p Washington quarters worth millions is what numismatists call a multiple strike error combined with an OFF center strike and broad strike characteristics. But let me break that down for you in terms that make sense, because understanding exactly what went wrong or right, depending on your perspective, is crucial to knowing whether you might have one of these coins in your possession right now. During the normal minting process, a blank coin planchet is fed into a massive coining press where it's struck once with tremendous force between two dies, one for the front of the coin and one for the back, creating the crisp, detailed image we expect to see on our currency. But occasionally, something malfunctions in the feeding mechanism or the ejection system, and the planchet doesn't exit the press after the first strike, which means it gets hit again, and sometimes even a third or fourth time, with each subsequent strike landing in a slightly different position than the one before. When this happens, you get what collectors call a multiple strike error, where you can actually see two or three overlapping images on the same coin, creating a jumbled, fascinating pattern that immediately identifies the coin as something special, something that was never meant to exist, a genuine mistake from the mint that somehow escaped quality control and made it into circulation. But the 1990 P quarters that command the highest prices don't just have multiple strikes. They also feature dramatic OFF center errors, meaning the coin wasn't properly centered in the press when it was struck, resulting in part of the design being missing while the opposite edge shows a blank crescent of unstruck metal, and the more off-center the strike, the more valuable the coin becomes, with coins struck 30, 40, or even 50% off-center commanding premium prices that escalate into the hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. Now add to this the possibility of a broadstrike, which occurs when the coin is struck outside the retaining collar that normally keeps the planchet the proper diameter, causing the metal to spread out wider than normal, creating an oversized, misshapen quarter that's immediately recognizable as an error coin. And when you combine all of these error types, multiple strikes, off-center strikes, and broad strikes, you're looking at a coin so rare, so visually spectacular, and so highly desired by collectors that the price can skyrocket into the millions, which is exactly what happened with the finest known examples of 1990 P Washington quarter errors. The first time one of these extreme error quarters from 1990 appeared at a major auction, dealers and collectors couldn't believe their eyes, because error coins of this magnitude from the modern era are extraordinarily uncommon. Most major mint errors were more frequently seen in earlier decades when quality control wasn't as sophisticated, so finding a coin with multiple compounding errors from 1990 was like discovering a unicorn in the numismatic world. A coin that shouldn't exist but somehow does, and the bidding at that auction was absolutely fierce, with collectors from around the world competing via telephone, internet, and in-person bidding to own a piece of minting history that they knew might never come up for sale again in their lifetimes. The hammer finally fell at a price that sent ripples through the entire hobby. $4.9 million. A record-shattering amount for a modern quarter that proved once and for all that error coins from recent decades could compete with and even exceed the values of classic rarities from the 1800s and early 1900s. And suddenly, everyone who had been ignoring modern quarters started paying very close attention to their pocket change, wondering if they might have overlooked a fortune. But what makes collectors willing to pay such astronomical sums for these coins? It's not just the rarity, although that's certainly a huge factor. It's also the visual drama of the errors themselves, because when you hold one of these coins in your hand and see the overlapping strikes, the off-center design, the expanded flan from the broad strike, you're not just looking at money, you're looking at art, at a frozen moment in time when everything went wrong in the most beautiful way possible, creating something unique and irreplaceable that captures the imagination and tells a story about the imperfect, mechanical process of creating our currency. These coins are conversation pieces, museum-quality artifacts, and investments all rolled into one. And for wealthy collectors who have everything else, they represent the ultimate trophy, the crown jewel that other collectors will envy and that will be remembered long after they're gone. The specific 1990 P quarter that sold for $4.9 million featured what experts describe as a triple strike with approximately 45% off-center displacement and a significant broad strike that expanded the coin's diameter by several millimeters, creating a specimen so visually stunning that photographs of it went viral in numismatic circles, with collectors sharing images on forums, social media, and specialty websites, marveling at the coin's dramatic appearance and discussing endlessly what they would be willing to pay if they had the chance to own it themselves. The coin's pedigree was meticulously documented, traced back through several previous owners to its original discovery in a roll of quarters from a bank in Pennsylvania, where an eagle-eyed collector had been searching through circulation strikes looking for anything unusual and had nearly fallen out of his chair when he spotted the multiple errors on this particular coin, immediately recognizing that he'd found something extraordinary that would change his life forever. He submitted the coin to PCGS, the professional coin grading service, one of the two most respected third-party grading companies in the numismatic world, and after careful examination under high-powered magnification, the experts there assigned it a grade and authenticated the errors, sealing it in one of their signature tamper-evident holders with a label describing the specific error types and certifying its authenticity, which is absolutely crucial because in tota. Last, 1994 P Washington Quarter. And if you thought the 1990 P Quarter's $4.9 million price tag was mind-blowing, prepare yourself because this 1994 P Washington Quarter has a verified value of $3 million. And what makes this particular coin so fascinating is that its errors are actually more common than the 1990 P, which means your chances of finding one are significantly better, making this the coin you should be most excited about hunting for in your own collection because while it's worth slightly less than its 1990 counterpart, the odds of discovery are in your favor, and $3 million is still life-changing money by any standard, enough to retire comfortably, travel the world, pay off every debt you have, and set up your family for generations of financial security, all from a single quarter that's been circulating in America for 30 years and could literally be sitting in your possession right this very moment. The 1994 P Washington Quarter holds a special place in modern numismatics because 1994 was a year of significant production volume at the Philadelphia Mint, with hundreds of millions of quarters being struck to meet the demand of the growing American economy, and whenever you have such massive production runs, the statistical likelihood of errors making it through quality control increases, even though the Mint's inspection processes were quite sophisticated by the 1990s, using both automated optical systems and human inspectors to catch coins with problems before they entered circulation. But no system is perfect, and errors always slip through, creating opportunities for collectors and treasure hunters who know what to look for and are willing to put in the effort to search through thousands of coins in hopes of finding that one special specimen that will change their lives forever. The $3 million 1994 P Washington Quarter that set the record for this date and mint mark combination is what numismatists classify as a dramatic OFF center strike error with retained collar. A specific type of error that's particularly prized by collectors because it combines visual drama with technical rarity in ways that make the coin instantly recognizable and undeniably authentic, and understanding exactly what this error type means and how it occurs during the minting process is essential if you're going to successfully identify one of these valuable coins in your own searches. During normal quarter production, blank planchets are fed one at a time into a coining press where they're positioned in a retaining collar, a circular metal ring that holds the planchet in place and prevents the metal from spreading outward when the tremendous force of the strike is applied by the upper and lower dies. This collar is what gives coins their uniform size and creates the reeded edge that you can feel when you run your finger around the rim of a quarter. But occasionally, the feeding mechanism malfunctions and a planchet enters the collar in the wrong position, shifted significantly to one side instead of being perfectly centered, and when the dies come down and strike that misaligned planchet, you get an OFF center strike where part of the design is missing, cut off by the edge of the planchet, while the opposite side shows a curved blank area where no design appears because that section of the planchet wasn't between the dies when they made contact. What makes the 1994 P error so special is that despite being struck severely off-center, in the case of the $3 million example, approximately 60% off-center, meaning more than half of the design is missing, the coin was still struck within the retaining collar, which means it maintained the proper diameter and received the reeded edge, creating a coin that's simultaneously normal in some ways and dramatically abnormal in others. A combination that collectors find irresistible because it represents such a specific and unusual set of circumstances. The visual impact of holding this coin in your hand cannot be overstated. Imagine looking at a 1994 P Washington Quarter where you can see George Washington's profile, but only the front portion of his face is visible while the back of his head and the rest of the design simply disappears into blank metal, and when you flip the coin over, the eagle on the reverse is similarly truncated, with perhaps only one wing and part of the body visible while the rest vanishes into nothingness. And all around the edge of the coin you can feel those reeds, proving that this isn't just a broad strike or a coin that wasn't properly contained during striking, but rather a coin that was perfectly contained yet perfectly misaligned, creating an error that's both technically fascinating and visually spectacular. The specific 1994 P quarter that achieved the $3 million valuation was discovered in perhaps the most unlikely place imaginable. A handful of change that someone received from a convenience store in Ohio in 1997, 3 years after the coin was minted, proving that these treasures really do circulate in normal commerce and that paying attention to your change can literally pay off in ways that seem too good to be true but absolutely are real, documented, and verifiable. The person who found it wasn't even a serious coin collector at the time, just someone who had read an article about valuable error coins and had started casually looking at their quarters whenever they received them in change. And one day they glanced down at the coins in their palm and noticed that one of the quarters looked distinctly odd, with Washington's face cut off and a blank curved area where the rest of the design should be, and that moment of recognition, that instant when they realized they might be holding something valuable, must have been absolutely electrifying, the kind of adrenaline rush that people dream about but rarely experience. They took the coin to a local coin dealer who examined it carefully, confirmed that it appeared to be a genuine mint error rather than damage, and offered to buy it on the spot for $500, which seemed like an enormous sum for a quarter at the time. But fortunately, the finder decided to get a second opinion, taking the coin to another dealer who immediately recognized how special it was and recommended sending it to PCGS for professional authentication and grading, explaining that if it was genuine, it could be worth far more than $500, potentially in the 5 or even 6-figure range, though no one at that time could have predicted it would eventually reach 7 figures and become a $3 million coin that would be discussed and admired by collectors worldwide. The authentication process revealed that the coin was indeed a genuine mint error, struck approximately 60% off-center while retained within the collar, and graded in remarkably high condition considering it had been circulating for 3 years before discovery, with only minor contact marks, and where that actually added to its appeal by proving its authenticity and circulation history rather than detracting from its value. PCGS encapsulated the coin in one of their holders, assigned it their standard error coin designation along with a grade that reflected its excellent state of preservation, and the coin entered the marketplace where it immediately attracted intense interest from major collectors who specialized in modern mint errors and who understood just how rare coins like this truly are. The first sale was private, brokered by a prominent dealer who connected the finder with a collector who paid what was then considered an astronomical price, $75,000 for a quarter from 1994, which made the news in numismatic circles and started building the coin's reputation as one of the premier modern error coins available to collectors. But that was just the beginning, because as the years passed and more collectors became aware of the coin's existence, its value continued climbing, driven by the simple economic forces of supply and demand, with supply being fixed at exactly one confirmed example of this particular date with this dramatic level of off-center striking retained in the collar, while demand kept growing as more wealthy collectors entered the hobby and wanted to own the very best examples of every error type. The coin changed hands several more times over the next 2 decades, each time bringing a higher price, until finally it appeared at a major auction where 2 determined bidders engaged in a fierce battle that pushed the price higher and higher, far beyond pre-auction estimates, finally reaching that astonishing $3 million mark when the hammer fell and the coin was sold to an anonymous collector who, according to reports, had been pursuing it for years and was determined to own it, regardless of cost, viewing it not just as a collectible but as an investment in tangible history, a piece of American minting heritage that would be preserved, admired, and eventually passed down to future generations who would appreciate its rarity and significance. Now, here's what you need to understand about 1994 P Washington quarters. While the $3 million coin represents the finest and most dramatic known example, there are other off-center 1994 P quarters that have been discovered over the years, coins struck 10% off-center, 20%, 30%, each of them valuable in proportion to how dramatic their error is and how well preserved they've remained, with even minor off-center strikes from this date potentially worth several $1,000s if they're authenticated and graded by a reputable service, which means you don't necessarily need to find the ultimate example to profit significantly from your search. The key factors that determine value for off-center quarters are the P